All right, everybody, let's get started. Welcome to the second episode of A Night on the Lot with Chet and
Welcome,
Fletch.
welcome.
When we first started these, we put out a big survey of 50 different topics to see what teachers would want to hear about the most, and sort of put them in order based on which one was the most popular. So tonight, we'll jump right into it. We're not going to spend a lot of time with the talky talk here. We're going to jump right into the presentation, which is, if everyone's been paying attention, how to get a high production value on a low budget. And sort of the objective of this tonight's discussion.
I think your tone was a little off. You should have started with, oh, you did start high with a low. Got it. No, you went low. You went high second. You know, high production value for a low budget.
Oh, I see what you're saying. But on a low budget, it was small text, so it had to be a high voice.
Yeah, okay.
So what we're going to do is we're going to start off by kind of a really quick recap of what we're going to touch on tonight. This is going to be a top 10 list for us of watching thousands of student films and trying to get our head around what are the most common issues that students are sort of duplicating in their films that are mistakes or things they need to focus on. So feel free at any time to write a question in the chat, and we'll come back to it. We'll be doing Q&As at the end of each of these sections as you guys go. So here we go. Number one, get a microphone. Too many student films, just you can't hear them. They're using the microphone that's only on the camera. Number two, lighting. Most students don't even think about lighting at all.
The difference that it makes when you do.
Number three, L cuts and J cuts. If you don't know what those are, we'll get to them as we start to discuss each of these in detail. But it's an editing technique. Trim up the ends. Your students tend to leave way too much on the end of a cut or on the head of the cut. So snip those off. Color timing or color grading, whatever you want to call it, either one. If you don't know what that is, again, we'll get to it as we climb up the list here. Composition. This is just your camera's composition. Students need to know more about how to compose a shot and what makes a great shot. Blocking, sort of the dance between camera and actor. And so that's our whole last episode was about blocking, as we broke down a Steven Spielberg scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Go watch that one if you haven't seen it. It's really good.
Yep. Next, depth of field. This is something that students aren't even familiar with, depth of field. Somewhat because of all they've had access to are iPhones and things like that. But it's important that they understand what it is and what it does. Foley. Going back and adding sound to your movie. Number 9. Number 10, of course, is develop.
The one that is always long forgotten.
So now let's jump into each one of these in detail, and we'll talk about each one and kind of give examples and answer any questions. So number 1, microphones. If you can't hear, then nothing you say matters. So this is important. So all too often, teachers only buy the cameras and they're not focused on getting good audio because hey, there's a microphone on the camera, right? Unfortunately,
that's great audio.
That microphone that's sitting on your camera is pretty much worthless. It's great for capturing scratch audio that you can sync to later, but ultimately the microphone that's on your camera is a piece of junk. Especially if your camera now, what if you're doing a wide shot and that camera is now 30 feet away? I can't hear a word anybody's saying. So get yourself a microphone. Now let's talk about some of these different microphones really quickly. Number 1 that I suggest is this top one. Let me just, my pointer here, you can see it. Is this one right here. This is a shotgun mic. Now, there's all sorts of different brands. You don't have to buy the Rode. But a shotgun mic is a unidirectional microphone that only picks up what you point it at. The second kind of microphone is an omnidirectional microphone here. This one is good for studio work where you can control sort of the ambient sound. So the sound in the room isn't slapping all over the walls. It's just isolated right there around the microphone. This is a great microphone for narration, voiceover, things like that. The last one is a very particular mic, but they're good, is some wireless mics. And it's a good idea to have, at the very least, 2 sets of these. Now, one is a receiver and one is a transmitter. So you need 2 just to have 1 microphone. And if one person's talking to somebody in a scene, odds are they're probably talking to somebody else. So it's a good idea to have 2 sets of lav mics like this.
So these 2 things are considered 1 set. So it'd be a total of 4 units.
Exactly. Okay, now moving on. There's a number of different ways to capture audio. A lot of people have plugged it straight into the camera. It's not the greatest way to do this. One of the better ways is nowadays they have these little, they're digital recorders. We use a Zoom. You can see it here, pictured here. This isn't exactly the one we use, but when we're doing documentaries and stuff, a Zoom is great because you can plug in several different microphones and be receiving on all of those. So if you had 4 different wireless labs, or if you had a shotgun mic and wireless labs, you could get them all and mix them all, and they're all on their own channels inside the Zoom. And then you take this when you're back into the studio, and in this picture here, you can see that it's actually just piping it straight back into the camera. We like to record it separately because what happens if that audio guy needs to be 30 feet away from the camera? You're not going to, this cable isn't 30 feet, you know, this is like 8 inches. So it's best to use this. You need a slate, and the sound guy is responsible for the slate. And on the slate, you're going to write the scene and take and the roll and all that other stuff that goes on it. But this way, you can sync your sound, your audio, in post the way it's really done. And that is kind of a really quick basis on audio work.
Well, and just one more thing, the slate. Not only do you use it for syncing your audio, but you use it for organization, right? So as you've got to take that take may be garbage, and so you can be taking notes and say, okay, take 3 is no good, or take 5 is great. So you can really sort of focus in on the footage you're getting, so you don't have to import everything. It really is a good organizational feature that a lot of students don't use, and it just takes a little bit of time and a little bit of extra effort, and it makes a big difference.
So, do we have any questions so far? I think it looks pretty clean.
No, right? And if you guys have questions, they're just going to put them in the queue, and I'll bring them out. So
okay, perfect. So we're going to keep going then. So on to our next topic, which is lighting. If I can't see it, it doesn't exist. Okay? All too often, and I could show you example after example, students don't think about how to best light a scene. And it doesn't have to be, I'm not talking about, oh my gosh, we have to have 4 12Ks and a generator and all these other things. Not even expensive kits. So I want to give you 3 ways of lighting a set or a scene that are super easy, super cheap. They almost are non-existent when it comes to price tag, and the
effect makes astonishing. So much of a difference. I mean, it is night and day, literally with lights and no lights. But it is night and day difference in the quality and what you see.
So here we go. 3 very simple aspects. Number 1, we're going to talk about is this one right here. Right? She's holding a lantern. We call this a practical. This is a lamp that the actor it's in the scene. The actor's either holding it or it's in the scene itself with a lamp on the table or whatever. You can use those. It's just your average everyday lamp. Just make sure it's in the frame, and now you've got some better light in the scene. In this case, she's holding a lantern. The second one down here is a China ball. Now, China ball, You can get these almost anywhere, Pier 1 Imports or Walmart, whatever. You can. It's Hollywood's China balls are exactly the same as everybody else's. There's nothing special about it. You go to Home Depot, get a little light bulb for and a cable for like maybe $5, and it can be like 100 watt or a 60 watt, whatever you want to use. Get a piece of PVC pipe and run the cable, tape it to the PVC pipe, and then hang that China ball out into the middle of the scene, and you will be astonished at the light that you'll get. We'll go over some of those images in just a moment.
It's beautiful light, yeah.
It's a really soft, beautiful light, yeah. The last one is just a bounce card. Now, he has what's called a shiny board, and literally you can get one of these for probably $5 at Home Depot. Go get yourself a piece of insulation board that's shiny on one side, or you can get the same materials off of B&H for really expensive, but it's pretty much the same thing. Now this one's a shiny board, but you can get them in gold, and you can get them in silver, and you get them in white that just is a soft bounce back. And the idea is to reflect light back onto the subject. So you're not really lighting anything, you're just controlling or manipulating the light that's already there. So let me show you a couple of images of what it looks like with and without using a bounce or a reflector. So you can kind of see right away, the first shot, you can really see some of the shadows. It's a little harder light. It looks like it's a pretty nice cloudy day anyway where she's at, because the shadows on her face are not super hard. But they've gone and put a bounce underneath her chin, and you can see how it lights up the underside of her eyelids, or her eyes, and her chin. Now, the other thing that it enables you to do is, here we have a shot. It's a beautiful shot, but she's having to expose. She's not able to expose the face correctly because the backlight is blowing her face out. So she brings in a little reflector, brings up the light, and she's able to ratchet down the stop, which exposes her face correctly now. Much prettier. This next one's pretty stark. So you see how dark those shadows are on the side of her face and under her eyes. Now you pop a bounce card in a reflector, and this is definitely a bounce card. It's much softer than the reflector, and you can see the difference it makes in the exposure. Now let's talk. I'll show you a couple of brief examples of the China ball. So the China ball has a really interesting soft light to it, and it's really pretty light. You'll notice that it wraps around, the shadows wrap around the face in a very elegant way. Here's another one. It's very soft. It's very flattering. There's no hard shadows. It just becomes really soft. There's another one. And it gives a great ambiance to the scene. Now this is something that is so simple, I can't even describe it. And we use it all the time in the movies. All the time. And there's nothing special about the equipment we use to pull it off. It's the same, $3 China ball that you'll get at Pier 1 Imports. Okay. Any questions so far?
And I would even, this is the very basic level of lighting that makes a huge difference. I would almost, you can do other things that are more complicated, but not even that much more expensive. But these basic principles should be required with every shoot that they do. Like, your students shouldn't ever go out without a reflector and a China ball,
Yeah,
and then
you don't really know what you're going to get, right? When you go out to the location, maybe it's not as sunny as the day you did your location scout, and you need something to give a little extra punch to the subject.
Okay.
All right, we ready? We're moving on? No questions? All right, we're moving on. Feel free to leave questions in there, guys. We'll come back to them as we go through this. We'll also do a quick Q&A at the end of all of it, so wrap it all up. So the next topic that we're going to talk about is J cuts and L cuts. Sometimes it's more interesting to see the reaction. Now what this means is, if you're not familiar with the term, this L right here sort of denotes what the cut looks like. the end of the audio or the video clip stops here, and the audio rolls on while it goes into the next clip, right? That's called an L cut. You got the audio that's creating the bottom part of that L. A J cut is just the reverse. It starts in the audio, and then the picture comes in later. It softens the cut. It makes things more pleasing to watch. It also enables you to compress time. And sometimes it's more interesting to listen to what's being said in this audio down here and watch what's happening above. So
you're able to watch the reaction of the person or what's going on who's actually listening to what's being said. And so often our students just cut back and forth, and you don't get that dynamic of responses and interactions.
It's kind of funny because unless you're paying attention, you might just miss it. So I'm going to show you an example here, and we'll see if you catch it. We'll see if you catch the first couple.
Yeah. Just picked up the text. That's easy. Hey, Rob, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. Gloria? Ma'am? Woo! Hey, this must be yours, buddy.
Thanks,
Oh, look at that. You eat that whole thing? You know what? You should consider some alternative snacks. Keeping fitness fun, buddy.
Okay, did you catch it? All right, did you catch it? Everybody see where it was?
No, okay, that's good.
That's good, because that means that they're doing their job. You got soaked up into the story pretty quick. Let's watch it one more time, and I'll show you exactly where it's at.
Yeah. Just picked up the text. That's easy, buddy. Hey, Rob, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. Gloria? Ma'am? Woo! Hey, this must be yours, buddy.
Thanks,
Oh, look at that. You can eat that whole thing? You know what?
Did you see it?
So he continues, we go on to the kid, and he continues to talk.
And back and forth.
Watch for right there. Back it up just a little bit, Fletch, and play that again.
Hey, this must be yours, buddy.
Thanks, mister.
Oh, look at that. You can eat that whole thing? You know what? You should consider some alternative snacks. Keeping fitness fun, buddy.
All right.
It just smooths out the edit. Like it really sort of keeps you involved, because you could have stayed on him the whole time and then gone to the little kid, back to Jeremy Renner, back to the kid, back to Jeremy Renner. Instead, you stay on the kid while he's got the cookie in his hand, and he says, hey, you should really, watch what you're eating, and we're getting the kid's response. So I love it. It's so subtle. And the first time I watched this clip, I just was watching it, and I missed the whole thing. I was like, wait a second, Fletch, you got to play it back for me, because I was too much into it. But you're right. You get the facial.
Sometimes it's more interesting to see the reaction of what someone's saying than to see what the person's saying it. All right, so that's a J cut, or sorry, that's an L cut. The J cut is just the opposite of that, but they're sort of symbiotic. They're both the same thing, just backwards of one another. All right, back to our presentation. The next thing we're going to talk about is trimming the ends. Not everything you do is interesting. So all too often, students tend to think that everything they do is really funny or really interesting, and it all should be on the screen. And the truth of the matter is 80% of what we do in our lives is really boring to everybody else. So in order to tell the story and do it quickly and keep everyone's attention, you got to trim those ends up. Students almost consistently, almost with every cut, you could trim off some from the head and some from the tail. And I can't tell you how many times I've watched a student film that was probably 5 minutes long, and I could have done the same show in 60 seconds. That's how much extra stuff they just have hanging on the ends of their clips. You got
That's pretty
anything to add?
dramatic, Fletch. Are you willing to stand by that? 5 minutes to 60 seconds?
No, I'm serious. I'm serious. It was 5 minutes long. The story was super simple, and you could have done it in 60 seconds. Could have done it as a commercial. Didn't need all the stuff they were doing.
Well, and in a not so dramatic example, it's sometimes it's just the very, you know, they're walking to the frame, and the students will have him completely leave the frame, you know, or coming into the frame, or going to the door. He's walking to the door to go in the front door of the house, and they'll follow him all the way up.
He gets up off the couch, and then he goes around the corner. He leaves the door. He gets in his car. He pulls out of the driveway. He puts it in drive. He drives down the. And the truth, all you need is the guy getting up from his seat, leaving out the door, and showing up in his car wherever he ends up.
Right.
You just don't need any of the stuff in between. Nothing happens. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really a compression of time. That's your goal. Is to compress.
The students to give her the illusion. It's
Yep.
true. It's the illusion that the rest your mind will fill in. It just makes up the difference. You just don't need it. Maybe in the 1920s you needed to show all that, but you know, audiences are pretty sophisticated now, and they know where you're going. Okay, so on to our next subject, color grading. Okay, so this is something we see in some of the higher courses, and some of the students who get really serious about making movies. This starts to become a tactic that they'll pull out of their hat finally. Mostly because they've gotten to a place in their movie making where they want to impress. They want to make something that's good, and it's not just, you know, making the assignment so they can check the box and say, I did the assignment. No, they want to impress beyond that. They want to show it. They want to take it to film festivals, and so they start looking at other ways of upping the ante for their film. And one of the effective ways they do this is by color grading. Now, when you're shooting a movie, especially nowadays in digital, there's a method to sort of the madness of color grading and capturing the image on your camera. And one of the things you want to do with your camera is you want to turn off all preconceived formats, and I always have them turn off the autofocus. I have them turn off everything auto, so it forces them to understand how to expose the scene properly. Because if they can understand that, certainly turn off autofocus for sure. If nothing else, please turn off autofocus. It's completely useless to filmmakers. So the next thing is when you turn off all of the profiles on the camera, what you film will return back to you and look kind of muddy. It doesn't look very good because it's actually saving all of that data inside of the image that you can then, in color grading, pull it all out, and you have much more data. Whereas if you are shooting with a profile on your camera, it's baking in the look of the film right inside the camera, and you don't have much of a choice afterwards. You have complete control in post if you'll turn off all of those profiles and just shoot raw, not raw format now. No, just shoot raw without the profile. And then at that point, you have all this information that you can go down deep inside the layers, into the contrast, and into the highlights, and pull out all the information you want. And so you get to color your film in post, which didn't used to be the case. When you shot on film, you had to, it's called a negative shooter. So this is a director of photography who knows how to expose his negative every single scene so it matches, and they had to put filters in front of the lens to make the film sort of match and do what they wanted it to do, and push it in the lab to make sure that it was exposed properly and developed differently. And it was a huge process, and now you can do all that in post, and it's called color grading. So let me show you a few examples of what color grading looks like. We'll start off with a show that back to Jeremy Renner there, Chet.
Yeah, so this was a shot, or this shot here is a shot that doesn't have any color done to it. It's not been graded or anything. And it was interesting, excuse me, while we were on the set, we broke out this jacket for Jeremy Renner to wear. And Jeremy's a really nice guy, so he doesn't ever flip out. But essentially, he sort of flipped out and said, guys, I don't want to be wearing a Smurf blue jacket. This doesn't match my character. This is not who I am. This is not what I want to do. And we're like, but Jeremy, I promise you, we're going to do some color grading, and we're going to lay in some filters on this in post, and we promise you, you won't look like a Smurf, but it will have a nice tone to it, And so we had to take a picture and kind of lay in the filter on it of what it would do, and the end result was this, which is not Smurf blue, but it's a really kind of cool look, So he finally just kind of went with us and said, okay, got it. But this is just one example. So we had Mini Driver. This was one of the film was shot in 4 different time periods. And so we colored each of the different time periods different colors. And so this one was more of in the desert, and we wanted it to feel like it was in the desert, that it was hot, and that it really felt arid. So we colored it like it was arid. And so really suck the colors out, suck the energy out. I mean, if you see that picture, and then she looks tired there. Go back to the last one, Fletch. It feels like there's more energy there. She still has the same look on her face, but the fact that we've sucked the color out, it feels like it's literally sucked the life out of her. She's got, she's worn out, essentially. And so we're telling story with color still, okay? And this next one is the same. This is kind of the same time period. It's in the desert, so we wanted to suck out the color, which really feels like an old postcard, doesn't it? We could put some cracks in that and scratch up the film. It looked like an old postcard, okay?
Welcome to Death Valley.
Yes. And then this one was kind of our hero shot in the film. He was actually blinded in one eye, so we started on this shot and kind of pulled out, but there it is colored. So it's just, he's in prison at point, and it's almost black and white.
Yeah,
once he got to prison.
So that's color grading, something we don't see a lot of students do, but when they start to get serious, they realize what color means to a movie and the emotional impact it can have on the audience.
It's another layer of telling your story. That's what it is. I mean, sound is one layer. Lighting is another layer of just telling your story. Color grading is another. And the more layers that they put into it, and we'll talk about a few more layers, the better and more professional it feels.
Oh, you missed the screen. Well, you know what, Teresa? That'll be this will be up for everybody to watch about an hour after the broadcast tonight, and we're going to make the keynote available to anybody who wants it. So you will see it if you missed it. Okay, so on to. Can you see the pictures now? Are you able to see them now, or is it not coming through? We're going to move on to composition. Oh, you still can't see it? I don't.
Can anyone else see it?
Can everybody else see them? Oh, okay. All right. So they are being recorded. Okay, good. That's good to know.
Okay.
Okay.
This
so
is an interesting shot. This is one this is from Minority Report, and fortunately I was on the set, and this was actually a photograph that our on-set photographer took. This shot ended up being on one of the posters, actually. Yeah. But it's a beautiful shot. I mean, what a great shot. Composition. Great. This was cool. Quite
Steven
a capture
as well, because it is in the movie. He must have seen his frame and thought, "Oh, that's awesome. I'm going to use that in the movie. Here, put the camera right here, and blah blah blah." All right, using the camera to speak to the audience. So let's talk about composition a little bit, because students don't even think about composition. And composition, you're telling the audience where to look and how to feel and what to think. And so it's a subtle art form, like all the other art forms that are part of cinema. But if you know what you're doing, it can be a powerful one. So let's start with a few of the classics, right? This is The Shining, of course. And these lines indicate lines that you can see inside of the frame. This line here, and all these lines are pointing to what? This line on the back, the wainscoting on the back wall. All of these lines are pointing to our character, and that's super important because it draws the eye right to where I want you to see. You know, if the cinematographer wants you to look over here, trust me, they would find a way to make you look over there, make you look where they want you to look, such as this frame. Over here, they want you to look right here. Look at all the lines that are pointing, literally pointing at our subject. All these different lines. This is super important. And just they're called leading lines, and they lead the eye to the viewer, or eye of the viewer to the subject. Another rule is called the rule of thirds. Now, this is a pretty basic rule. It's been around since the Roman era, and it is basically all it does is splits the frame into thirds with these vertical lines, and then places the subject in one of these boxes. And in this particular case, they had they've split this middle box into its own 3 sections, right, with these horizontal lines, and then they placed C-3PO in the third quadrant of that portion of the frame. Another example of this rule of thirds is here. This is a really good example. Actually, you've got Watson on one side of the frame, and I don't know who he's talking to on the left hand, and then Sherlock in the middle. Each one of them living in the space that is sort of quarantined for them according to the rule of thirds.
And something that's kind of interesting, some students will do accidentally, they might kind of do some of this composition just because they've seen so many films. But I think it's important that they understand what they're doing and they do things purposefully, because what's happening here is a piece of the story is being told, and it's being done through composition. If you're doing it by accident, you might tell the wrong story versus what you really want the audience to be doing or seeing and feeling. So we want our students to really focus on composing the shot, not just kind of letting it happen.
Right. Yeah, there are such things as happy accidents, but you never want to go out thinking to yourself, we're going to get so many happy accidents that it's going to make our film good. That would be a mistake.
Yeah, that's...
All right, moving on to our next one. Blocking. Our whole last episode was all about blocking. We had a lot of fun. If you missed it, you can go back and see it. It's on the site right now. Where we took essentially a 4.5-minute scene out of Raiders of the Lost Ark and broke it down shot by shot. What looks to be at least 20 setups is actually only 8 that we go through. It's pretty cool. Shows you the economy of blocking if you know what you're doing. Okay, so let's talk about blocking really quick. This is another bit that we don't see students paying a lot of attention to. Too many students will just have an actor will sit there in a chair and we're just going to film them, and they don't move, they don't talk, they don't come closer to the camera, they don't go further away. It's so stale and so boring. And let's face it, every movie you've ever seen is what? Every scene is always about 2 people talking or more people. But it's always about something happening in the scene, and it's very frequent when it's a conversation scene. In a movie, what you're not paying attention to is what makes this conversation interesting? What are they saying? And whether they're saying something interesting or not, is the blocking helping tell the story, or is it just boring? And if the blocking isn't there, if it's not interesting to watch, people will stop listening. And so you have to kind of keep your audience engaged in what's being said, and the way you do it is through great blocking. So let's watch another scene real quick. This is from Citizen Kane, and I think you'll understand a little bit more of what I'm saying once you see this sequence. We're going to watch it once through, and then I'm going to stop it. I'm going to roll it back, and we're going to talk about what you saw, and then we're going to watch it again real quickly. It's not a very long scene.
Tell him now. Yes. I'll sign those papers now, Mr. Fletch.
You people seem to forget that I'm the boy's father.
It's going to be done exactly the way I told Mr. Fletch.
I don't see why we can't raise our own son just because we come in some money. If I want to go to court, a father has a right to. The board of the streets is built and leaves stock behind. That property is just as much my property as anybody's. Now that it's valuable, and if Fred Graves had any idea all this was going to happen, he'd have made out those certificates in both our names. They were made out of Kane's name. He owed the money from the board to the board of the bank. I don't hold and sign it my way away to any bank.
I want you to stop
Banks decision on all methods concerning its education, places of residence, and similar subjects. I know.
Stop all this nonsense.
We will assume full management of the Colorado Road, which had its Kane, who are the sole owner.
Where do I sign?
Right here. Harry, I'm asking you for the last time. Anybody think I haven't been a good $1,000 a year paid to you and Mr. Kane as long as we both live, and thereafter to the survivor.
Nice blocking.
Yes. Okay, so let's talk about this real briefly and what we actually saw. You could have turned down the audio on that scene and almost understood what was happening to some degree. You start off with this simple image of a boy playing in the snow, right? And then we pull back and we realize we're inside and we're shooting through a window and there's mom looking at him. We pull back any further and the boy gets less and less important the more we pull back. We pull back a little further and we introduce this other gentleman. And we realize that it's mom and this other gentleman, and they're talking about Charlie outside. And again, he becomes less important the further back we get. And as the camera starts to pull back, watch mom as she walks closer to the frame. She stays up with the camera, and dad stays back in the background. And what the filmmaker is saying, it's Orson Welles, by the way, what Orson Welles is saying is, there's Charlie back in the background. He is the subject of this argument that's happening between these two people right here. He's caught in the middle of them, literally and figuratively. As she stays up close to the camera, she gets bigger and dad gets smaller. She's controlling the argument, and he's becoming less and less significant in the conversation. Visually, he's smaller, she's bigger. And the next person who's even close to that is this other gentleman.
Thank you.
Now, they're positioned what? Two on one side who agree. Then you have Charlie. And then on the left-hand side of the frame, there's Dad, who disagrees. Literally, the struggle is between these three people, these two people against Dad, and Charlie's trapped in the middle. And when finally Dad decides to raise his voice a little bit, he steps up closer to the lens and becomes a little bit more important. Not a ton, but he becomes a little bit more important as he gets closer to the other two. The cinematographer is speaking to you, and most people aren't hearing it. And students rarely think about how they will stage something in order to help motivate and tell the story. And this is a perfect example of that, and Orson was a master at it, to be honest. One of the greats.
Well, and if you look at this, this was, were there any cuts? There were no cuts. This is one take. And so in one take, by blocking it, you've told all this story, you've put people on, you've done all those sorts of things, and no cuts. And you've blocked it so that your characters are walking into the places where you want them to be focused on. If I was an inexperienced student, I'd probably cut, I'd do a double on them, do a single on Dad, do a cutaway to the window, and then that's how I would cut this whole scene together. Well, that doesn't nearly tell the story that we just got shown here through blocking, and it was one take. Now, your actors have to be able to perform, but it was one take, and it's far more interesting this way than just blase, cut, done.
Okay. That was good. Do you need to watch it again?
Yeah, let's watch it one more time. Yeah, okay. For sure.
Be careful, Charles. Pull your muffler around your neck, Charles.
You'll have to tell him now.
Yes. I'll sign those papers now, Mr. Fletch.
You people seem to forget
People
that
seem to
I'm the boy's
forget that I'm the
father.
boy's
It's going to be done
father.
exactly the way I told Mr.
There ain't
Fletch.
nothing wrong with
There ain't nothing wrong with
I don't see
Colorado.
why we
I
can't
don't
raise
see
our
why
own
we
son
can't raise our own
just
son
because
just
we
because
come
we
in
come in some
for money.
money.
If I want, I can go to
If I
court.
want, I can go to
The father
court.
has a right
The
to.
father has a right
Order
to.
that beats his
Order
blood and
that
leaves
beats his
worthless
bill
stock
and leaves
behind.
worthless
That
stock
property
behind.
is just
That
as much
property
my
is just
property
as
as
much my
anybody's.
property as
Now that it's
anybody's.
valuable,
Now that
and
it's
if Fred
valuable,
Graves had
and if
any
Fred
idea all
Graves
this
had
was
any
going to
idea
happen,
all this was
he'd
going
have
to
made out
happen,
those
he'd have
certificates
made
in
out
both
those
our names.
certificates in both
They
our
were made out
names.
in Mrs.
They were made out in
Kane's
He owed
Mrs.
the money
Kane's
for the
name.
board
He
to
owed
the
the money
board
for
to
the
the
board
bank's
to the
decision
board to the
alone.
bank's
I
decision
know
alone.
all the
I
time
know
my
all
boy
the
away
time
to
my
leave
boy
bank
away
was
to
time.
leave
I want you
bank
to
every
stop
time.
all
I want
this
you to
nonsense.
stop
The
all this
bank's
nonsense. The
decision on
bank's
all methods
decision on all
concerning its
methods
education
concerning
and
its
places of
education
residence and
and
similar
places of
subjects is
residence
to
and
be
similar
final.
subjects to be
back
final.
period of a
Back
period.
period
I
of
want you to
guard
stop all
period.
this nonsense.
Stop all
We
this
will assume
nonsense.
full
We will
management of the
assume full
Colorado
management
loan,
of
of
the
which I
Colorado
accuse
loan,
Mrs.
which I
Kane. You are
Mrs.
the
Kane.
sole
You
owner.
are the
Where
sole
do I sign,
owner.
Mr.
Where
Fletch?
do I
Right
sign,
here.
Mr. Fletch? Right
Mary,
here.
I'm asking you
Mary,
for the last
I'm asking
time.
you for the last time.
Anybody think I haven't been a
Anybody
good
think I
father?
haven't been a good father?
$50,000 a year is to be paid
$50,000
to
a
you
year
and
is to
Mr.
be paid
Kane
to
as
you
long
and
as you
Mr.
both
Kane
live,
as long
and
as you both
thereafter to
live,
the
and
survivor.
thereafter to the survivor.
Well,
Well,
let's hope it's all for the
let's
best.
hope it's all
It
for the
is.
best. It is.
Well, I can't raise my own voice.
Go on, Mr. Fletch.
Go on, Mr. Fletch.
Everything else, the principal
Everything
as well
else,
as all
the
money
principal
earned,
as well
will
as
be
all money
administered by
earned,
the bank in
administered
trust
by
to
the
us.
bank in trust.
Love it.
All right.
That's a director, baby.
That is a director for sure. Okay. So let's move on now back to here. And our next subject is depth of field. Again, this is a topic that I think a lot of students don't fully comprehend, mostly because they've been dealing with cameras for a long time that really don't have the ability to do a large depth of field. But now with DSLRs and that sort of thing, the lenses and the technology is sort of caught up. It used to be that video cameras didn't have a great, a shallow depth of field that you could take advantage of, nothing like cinema cameras. But today, it's quite a bit different. So let's talk about this really briefly. The basic rule of thumb when it comes to depth of field is this. The longer the lens, the more shallow the depth of field. Now, there are all sorts of caveats to that statement with f-stops and ISOs and things like that, and the amount of light that you can pump into a scene. But generally speaking, the longer the lens, the more shallow the depth of field. So if I have a really long lens, let's say 150 millimeter, if I get really far back from my subject and I zoom in to get the same frame on my subject that a 50 millimeter has, that depth of field will be crushed. And I'll get this sort of look on the left-hand side. I'll get this kind of a look with the background being nice and blurry. And what that does is it allows your eye, again, the cinematographer is saying, look here. Don't pay attention. If I was shooting on a wide, 35 mil or something back here, I can see everything's in focus behind him. My eye is sort of thinking, oh, what's back there? Oh, that's an interesting place. Oh, look at that car they just drove by. This one says, look here. I don't want you to pay attention to anything else other than what's happening to this gentleman. So a depth of field, the deft use of depth of field is a cinematographer's trick as well. And I don't see a lot of students using it very frequently. And if you know how to use it and use it effectively, you can do some really cool things with rack focus and all sorts of other neat things. All right. And let me show you a couple examples of depth of fields used effectively. Here's a shot that, this could have easily been lifted straight out of What Lies Beneath, Robert Zemeckis' film. It's not, but it could have been. It denotes all sorts of creepiness to me. I don't know. My images all go back to that movie from this bathtub thing. That or Psycho. Um, but you can see the depth of field. Where are you looking? Are you looking at this woman's face in the tub? No, of course not. You're looking at her hands. That's because the cinematographer is saying, look at her hands. Don't pay attention to her face. It's beautiful. Here's another one. Where you look directly at this eyeball, not this one. This specific eyeball is the only thing in focus. And so the cinematographer forces you to look where he wants you to look, which is great. It's brilliant. Here's another one. If this little girl in the background was in focus, your eye might be tempted to think about, well, what is she doing? What has she got in her hand? But it's not. The cinematographer.
Might be. It would be. That's what you'd be looking at.
Oh yeah, you totally would be. But in this case, the cinematographer has said, no, what's important about this scene, for whatever reason, are the blossoms on the tree. Don't pay attention to the little girl or what she's doing. I really want you, it's the tree that is making the statement that I want. So look here. Don't look there. And you can't do this kind of stuff if you don't understand the nature of cinematography and the opportunities you have to tell the story even better with just a handful of tricks at your disposal. And if you don't understand them, you're just going to go out there, you're going to shoot her just walking down the thing, and maybe, you know what, maybe it's important, maybe it's springtime, maybe these flowers remind her of something else in the movie about her mom being buried, and now there's flowers on her grave of the same kind of flowers that were. It's that kind of stuff, and you can tell these stories without saying a word. Hey, that wasn't bad for just making it up on the spot, was it?
That was a beautiful storyline. Yeah, if you go back to the picture of the guy with the tear, that's about where I was at myself.
Oh.
That was me.
Okay. All right. Next, we're going to talk about Foley. Now, this is something that you guys, honestly, you could have this kind of stuff in your classroom. I don't recommend doing, a whole Foley stage in your classroom because, quite frankly, Foley stages are funky.
Stink.
They smell.
They get a little funky.
They have a bunch of old furniture and old things in there and moldy
Car
things, and it just gets funky. It gets weird. But the point of the matter is that Foley is the art of atmosphere. It's the art of making the audience believe that what they're seeing is real, when in fact the person might be standing in front of a green screen. Today's movies are about 70 to 85% manufactured sound in post-production. Very little sound that you're watching on the screen actually was recorded during while the cameras were rolling. So Foley is a massive part of make-believe, of making the audience believe that what is happening, that the person is really driving a car and not just bouncing around, while someone pushes on the bumper and they're just stationary. No. The sound of the car is what tells you that it's moving. If there's screeching, there's danger. I mean, it's these sounds that make up so much of what we do. And to give you an idea of what a Foley stage might look like, this is a pretty normal one. I mean, all the ones I've ever been in look pretty close to this. This is actually better lit than most of the ones I've ever seen.
They're quite a dungeon usually.
Yeah, they're kind of dark dungeons. But that's just so that actors can, the performers can see the screen. And so they have pits that might have gravel or water or mud or, whatever in it. And they have logs and they have coconuts for sound of horses, and they got chains. And you name it, it's rack after rack after rack. It looks like, Home Depot or Costco with just
trash.
Just junk on the shelves, and lo and behold, they'll pull one off, and it's a chain, and they're wiggling it, and pretty soon they're watching the screen and they're recording them jiggling this chain, and it's magic. It's like it lights up the stage. And so,
the challenge here is that today's movies, 100% of today's movies, have Foley in them. So because of that, every audience member's ears are trained to want that level of sound and filler and atmospheric sound. And so when we don't do it as students, our films seem to be lacking something. And so that's why it really pays off. It really adds to a level of professionalism, and it's not expensive. It is not expensive at all. I mean, it just takes time.
You can pick up this kind of stuff at a local junk heap or a flea market or whatever. Yeah, so that is Foley, and movies would not be near what they are today without.
And just one last thing. I mean, I think it'll be pulling teeth initially to get your kids to do Foley, but once they get in there and they start going, you'll be kicking them out, and you'll be saying, guys, you have got to move on. And they'll be like, no, I just need to get a little bit more, another layer, because they'll start to see what it does to their film. So
this is actually one of the exciting parts for me in the filmmaking process, is the final mix and bringing in all the Foley and the sound. And it's the first time everything starts to get married up, and it's magic. And it doesn't matter your sound effects library. We have hundreds of thousands of sound effects in our sound effects library here on Sneak on the Lot. And you're not going to find every last sound effect you need, and it's not going to fit perfectly. You're going to have to go and record some stuff when you manufacture it. All right, and finally, this is our last thing for the night, and then we'll open it up for questions. And this is a big one for Chet and I, and we push this like nobody's business. This is what we've built our curriculum around. You'll notice that our curriculum is very heavy in this regard, but it is development. Sadly, students just want to get going. They just want to get out there and make the movie. I don't know how many of you have heard the phrase, well, I've got it in my head. I know what I'm doing. I know what I want to do. I just got to get out there and go do it. And then they come back and it's terrible, or it doesn't match up to what it could have been. Maybe it's great, but think of how much greater it could have been had everyone had an opportunity to sort of participate in the development process and throw out some concepts and kick around some ideas and squeeze. And this is what development is really all about, is squeeze all of the very best ideas out of a project and get it on the paper. Because no great movie was ever made with a bad script. It just doesn't work that way, folks. You got to have a great script, and then you move on from that. And while you're in production is nothing more, especially on low-budget productions, is nothing more than a continuous cycle of compromises that you constantly are compromising with every last little decision that you make. Oh, well, we can't do that because we can't do this because we don't have the dolly. We can't do this shot because we don't have the actor past noon. We can't, and it's constant. And you can fight these things off with money or time, right? If those compromises become less if you have a lot of money or if you have a lot of time in your shooting schedule, but you can do away with most of those compromises if you just do your work, your homework during the development process, and you write your screenplay and you think it out and you write it again and you write it again and you write it again until it's the best you can possibly make it, and you have squeezed every idea out of everybody on the team, and it's made, the whole project is made better by everybody. Then you move in to pre-production. So the last thing I will note is this is how we feel about development. To make a great film,
played by Alfred Hitchcock.
The script, and the script. And he's absolutely right. It was as true then as it is now. You have to have a great script, and let's face it, Hitchcock had some of the best scripts. So yeah, that is the presentation for the night. Let's have a few questions. We'll take a few minutes and answer any questions you guys might have.
Yeah, and just the last thing I'll say on development is that, you know, when you are, like Fletch said, you either have time or money, and when you have time is in development before you go into production, because once you go into production, it's like this funnel that kind of comes down to production. You have time up here, and then you have no time. And so when you're up in this portion of this funnel in development, you've got time, and it doesn't cost you anything to spend time and preparing and you know, really sort of getting you know, getting everything on the page. It's cheap. It doesn't cost you anything to, you know, click the keys of your typewriter, and that's where it's really gonna pay off, because if you put that time in development before things start rolling, and it's like you're on set and you're dealing with problems. I mean, when we were on Minority Report, it was crazy because the writer was writing pages for tomorrow, and it's, you know, and it's like, oh my gosh, he added a prop. We got to get that made overnight. So you're paying, you know, triple the payment, you know, to get that prop made, or whatever it might be. But the more you do that in development, the more money you're going to save, and the better your film's going to be.
All right, let's go ahead and show the first question. I'm pumped up to start. Unfortunately, it's 5:57 p.m. So how can I get students to want to write the script from thoughts to paper? Great question. You're asking us how to motivate students, really. The trick is, what I've found is when students realize what is a good film versus what is a bad film, and when they realize that there's students right next to them that can make a great film, suddenly it ups the bar and they want to reach for that bar. In fact, I'm going to show you a student film right now that I think you guys will get a kick out of, because it really kind of demonstrates all of the techniques that we've been talking about tonight in one of the student films that was uploaded just a week or so ago.
And before you throw that on there, one of the things that I just want to say is that the development process is a process that it takes some effort to get them motivated to do it. The more you can align it with this is what the professionals do, making it feel real, and this is how it's done in the industry. I think that always helps in helping them understand, well, this is how the professionals do it. Do you like the look of a movie, the movies that are in the theater? If you want that, you've got to do it like the professionals. And really sort of pushing that point will motivate them. But once they see it happen, they'll realize the value to it.
Yep. All right, we're going to show you this student film. I think you guys will like this.
What are you doing here?
What are you doing
I just
here?
want to talk.
I just want to
Well,
talk.
I don't want to hear it.
Well, I don't want to hear
How could
it.
you betray me?
How could you betray me?
What do you mean?
What
you
do
know
you mean?
I love you.
You know I love you.
It didn't mean anything.
It didn't mean anything.
Don't say anything.
Don't say
I
anything.
know you cheated.
I know you cheated.
And there's the proof.
And there's the proof.
This is my English
This
paper.
is my English paper.
I wrote this.
I wrote this.
You cheated on me.
You cheated off me.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
All right. So,
That's
you
awesome.
get the idea, right?
I mean, if you look at that and you start to analyze that, I mean, I just saw all the elements that we just talked about. There was great sound. I don't know if they did Foley or not, but that car door shutting and those kinds of things, the sound was great. There was rack focus. It told me where to look. Where do I want my story going? There was depth of field. Things were out of focus in the background. Things were, the phone was in focus. She was out of focus. We want the audience looking at the phone, not at her. Perfect. It was done. The lighting was beautiful. They composed their shots. I mean, man.
They did a really, really good job with this. I would have liked to have seen a little more Foley, but all in all, it's pretty tight. And they chose really effective music for it as well. One of the other questions here.
What would have been fun, Fletch?
Yeah.
You know what would have been fun? I was just watching that's last time. If you noticed, as she walked out of the house, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she's walking to the car, she passes through some light. And it was just from the sun. It would have been awesome to have her stop in the light. So she was in the light, he was in the dark, right there. If they could have composed that shot, back it up just a little bit. Compose that shot so they blocked it so that when she walks through that light right there, you can see right in front of her. Oh, how awesome would that have been? Right there.
Right there.
If they would have stopped her and blocked her, now obviously that sun's probably moving and it's not an artificial light, but how great would that have been? What kind of story does that tell? That tells the story that she's in the light, he's in the dark. What a great way to tell story.
Yep. I agree with that. That's awesome. Good idea. That's a happy accident. If you'd have seen that on, you'd have said, hey, stop right there in that light, hang on to it, and if we're losing our light, then we need to bring out something, but I want her to be in the light when she is saying to him and calling him to the carpet saying, it hurts everyone. Great. Great observation. All right, on to our next question. What do we have? Here we go, hang on. I'm getting there. Here we go. Do you have a set of industry standard documents used for pre-production? Oh my, Mike.
I think our curriculum does a really good job of outlining the steps.
Yeah, it really does. And it has downloadable documents along the way for various things, for beat sheets and things like that. But if you follow the curriculum for writing in our curriculum, it'll guide you right through every last step.
We have you pre-visualizing, we have you doing storyboards, we have you doing shot lists, we have you doing schematics, we have you doing filmscapes, we have you doing all of those things. Development, beat sheets, synopsis, log lines. We don't leave anything out of it. So, and even there are examples of great story structure and Raiders of the Lost Ark, and watch Raiders of the Lost Ark. Print up the PDF on Raiders of the Lost Ark, having them watch, figuring out where is plot point 1, what do we get introduced to in the in Act 1. There's just a ton of stuff in the curriculum. If you just take it step by step, it is all laid out there.
Okay, here's another one. Sorry, let me push this one. Where can I watch more? More what, Anna?
Just more films, I'm sure.
More films?
Yeah.
Well, we live in a really great day and age. Number one, you can watch films in our theater. One of the parts of our theater that really hinges on making the whole site work is making sure that students who are making movies and getting their films published to the theater there on the lot get reviewed by other students. So you should be watching. Look, I've made a lot of really good movies. I've made a lot of really bad movies. You learn from the good ones and you learn from the bad ones. I would say maybe even more. Failure is probably the meanest teacher, but also probably one of the most effective teachers. And so they need to watch some films of other people that didn't work.
Yes.
And go leave a review What is their analysis? Did they do a good job? Did they not do a good job? Why? Could they have done better? What did they do well? This is part and parcel of the critics course on the lot, and leaving reviews on movies inside the theater on the lot. And when your students upload their movies to the lot, I guarantee you one of the things that they're going to be wanting to hear is what other people are thinking about their movie. Other than that, man, you can go anywhere.
To me,
that's a great reference. You know, there's a million different, literally millions of different tutorials and really great stuff on the internet.
And I think, just like Fletch said, I'll echo it. You can't go wrong by watching bad examples. I mean, it's so apparent what's going on. I mean, you watch a bad example and you'll go, okay, they did not light. That's so flat. It's so ugly. Everything's in focus. Looks amateur. And you can see it. And 9 student films out of 10, you'll get the bad example. And then you get one gym like this, and man, does that inspire. It's like, dude, how did they do that? Well, they just took a little extra time. You know,
it ups the bar. Before you know it, you've got students who are looking at that one good movie saying, well, that's what I want to do. I want to do that. And it'll inspire them. All right, okay. We are 7 minutes over?
We're a little bit over. Like so thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. I hope this was helpful. It's fun having you all there, being able to talk about a few things. So
we do these every single month, so keep coming back. We got a lot more to go through. Thanks, everybody.